Okay. We will be waiting for a few more minutes and let everyone join in. Since it is right 1 p.m., there might be people waiting to join in. I can see some of them have already tuned in. And just for everyone's information, this meeting will be recorded and will also be hosted on YouTube via our YouTube platforms. Media will be hosting it, and we'll also be able to share the recording later with all the participants. Just for record keeping, we will also be sharing the slide deck that will be used by the presenters today. So after this meeting ends, you will receive your slide decks in an email from me, and you can also have an opportunity to get introduced to any of the speakers that you are interested in speaking with. So I would be happy to run those introductions later on as well. We'll be still waiting for 1 more minute and let people join in. Also to highlight, the chat feature and the Q&A sections are already opened. And if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A section, and we will discuss them after one of the speakers is done speaking. All right, a very good afternoon to one and all present here. On behalf of Media and Global Regulatory Services, I would like to welcome you all to this webinar where we are talking about internationalizing your MedTech innovation. This webinar is brought to you by Media and Global Regulatory Services in collaboration with Health Tech Enterprise, Red MedTech, EG Technology, Health Innovation West Midlands, NEOM, Digital Health and Care Alliance, and Medilink Midlands. We will be seeing a series of speakers who will be talking at different intervals. Right after their presentation, all the participants will have a short 2-minute window to put up your questions, and the speakers will try to address them. If due to time constraints, we are unable to answer any questions, or if the speakers are supposed to drop down, we might be still happy to introduce you to that speaker and make sure that you get all the questions answered towards the end and in the upcoming days as well. As you can see, today we will be joined by Jacob Skinner from Global Regulatory Services, Shara Mamadi from Media, Job Tennis from Health Tech Enterprise, Professor Laurie from Red MedTech, Ben Roberts from Medilink Midlands, Charles from Digital Health and Care Alliance, David Warwick from EG Technology, and Martin Sandhu from NEOM, and Tammy Holmes from Health Innovation West Midlands. A little about us. Media, Global Regulatory Services, and Creme de la Creme are the three brands and companies that we have with the GRS network. We are a regulatory and quality compliance consultancy. Our experts are driving innovation to market success. This market success is not just within the life sciences and medical devices, but it's for whole of the wider life science industry, where we do cover pharmaceuticals, in vitro diagnostics, digital health, biotech, health and beauty cosmetics, and medicinal cannabis, and maybe just anything and everything in the life sciences, from your novel medical devices, novel pharmaceuticals, and novel drugs as well. So feel free to contact us for any regulatory and quality compliance. We operate in the UK, USA, the European Union, and wider countries as well. That is supported by GRS, which is our parent company or part of our group company. A little housekeeping. Here you can see what at different pointers who speakers will be coming up one after the other, and they will be talking in detail about their topics. As I mentioned previously, please feel free to use the Q&A section and the chat section of this meeting to ask your questions and maybe to share any inputs that you would like to for the wider audiences to understand. After each and every speaker, all the questions related to their topic will be answered, and then we will move on to the next speaker. But towards the end, we still have a little time mm, kept aside for those questions which were not answered during the webinar because of the time constraints. So feel free to hang on until the end and make sure that your questions are answered. So, not taking much of time and bang on the schedule, I would like to pass this on to the first speaker of today's session, that is Jacob from Global Regulatory Services. Hello, Jacob. Would you like to introduce yourself briefly and begin your presentation? Thanks.
Yep, thank you, Jay, for the introduction. So a warm welcome to everyone today for this webinar on internationalising MedTech. So I'm Jacob Skinner. For those of you who haven't seen one of our webinars before, I am one of the regulatory and quality assurance consultants here at Global Regulatory Services, and I specialise specifically in medical devices. My career in MedTech began around 7 years ago, where I began working for an innovative radiotherapy systems manufacturer. During my time with that company, I became responsible for regulatory strategy, which included achieving successful regulatory approval for several Class 1 through to Class 2B devices placed on the European Union and UK markets, as well as successful maintenance of a ISO 13485 quality management system for the design, development and post-market activities relating to medical devices in the radiotherapy sector. I stepped into consultancy with Global Regulatory Services around about 2 years ago, and since then I've had the privilege really of guiding a very broad range of clients in the medtech space through complex regulatory requirements and changes across the UK, EU and further afield. So I think at Global Regulatory Services, what we really do is specialize in helping companies to navigate the intricacies of regulatory compliance. We're active across a wide range of areas from medical devices, medicinal products, naturals and cosmetics. And our expertise specifically in the medtech space includes setting up and maintaining quality management systems, facilitating regulatory submissions to obtain market approval, and assisting companies with ongoing post-market compliance and challenges. We are also positioned in the UK and able to act as a UK responsible person for non-UK based legal manufacturers and as a UK virtual importer as well. So we see our mission really as empowering medtech businesses to focus on innovation and growth, whilst we aim to take care of the regulatory complexities. So my session will be based on a summary of the international regulatory landscape, focused on recent updates and upcoming changes. This will really be a whistle-stop tour to identify the most pressing changes and what they mean for companies that are looking to access global markets. The slides might be quite content heavy, but I'm just going to provide a high level overview. I'm sure we can distribute the slides later on. So moving on. So first of all, I wanted to take a look at the UK post-market surveillance amendment. So the GB market is undergoing significant reform from a regulatory point of view, and a new regulation has been drafted and laid in Parliament for new post-market surveillance requirements. Once approved, this new regulation will bring about changes to how manufacturers monitor the devices after they've been placed on the market. And most importantly, it's critical to say that this will apply to all devices which are placed on the GB market, whether they are UKCA marked or CE marked. So the statutory instrument is looking like it will be made into law before the end of 2024 or possibly just into early 2025, and there is a 6-month implementation period on that. So in reality, manufacturers need to be looking to comply sometime around June 2025. So really, it's important to be looking at the process, developing the processes and procedures around that sooner rather than later. The changes in general won't be alien to any manufacturers who are already aligned or looking to align with the EU MDR. Particularly, we can see the introduction of some similar concepts, such as more robust post-market surveillance planning and requirements for periodic safety update reporting for devices of Class 2A and above. Also, for any manufacturers who are working within an ISO 13485 quality management system currently, I would really expect that an effective post-market surveillance system is probably already going to be in place, but it's definitely necessary to review the procedures against any of the specific requirements. The key points there really are any manufacturers placing devices on the UK market need to have an effective PMS and vigilance system in place. This needs to be through effective procedure development and training of the current staff. All devices on the UK market need to have a documented and detailed post-market surveillance plan, and devices of 2A and above will need to meet new periodic safety update reporting requirements. So, as part of the UK's regulatory future, the MHRA has announced that it's developing international recognition routes, which aim to streamline market access for medical devices that have already been approved by trusted international regulatory authorities. And really, this move is aimed at reducing overall regulatory burden for international manufacturing and speeding up access to the UK market for important new medical technologies which aid public health. So, to summarise the key points regarding international recognition routes, the UK MHRA has defined certain partners at this point, and these are the FDA in the US, Health Canada in Canada, the European Union, and the TGA in Australia. And any devices which are approved in these markets could benefit from a faster route to the GB market in future. There has also been some talk about considering Japan as well and adding the PMDA to the list of recognised regulatory partners in the future, but nothing has been finalised there yet. So it's important to say that we're still in consultation around this and nothing is defined, but essentially the requirements for recognition are looking like, first and foremost, the device needs to have approval in a comparable regulatory country. They also then need to adhere to specific UK requirements like English language labelling and packaging, Great Britain specific electronic compatibility requirements and measurement units, and the labelling of any carcinogenic, mutagenic and reprotoxic substances, so CMRs, very similar to the requirements under the EU MDR there. And then in terms of quality management system, what this looks like is that maybe for low risk class 1 and class A IVDs, there'll be an expectation to have an appropriate quality management system in place, but this won't need to be accredited. For class B IVD devices, there's a current consultation ongoing, but the suggestion is that the MHRA may mandate an accredited ISO 13485 QMS, and that's by a UCAS accredited assessment body as well. So something to bear in mind. And for all of the devices, really having an accredited ISO 13485 or MDSAP quality management system in place. There's also likely to be requirements for unique device identification, UDI, and specific traceability requirements to make sure that the MHRA can monitor any approved devices effectively through their life cycle. And this isn't a new requirement, but any non-UK manufacturer will still be required to appoint a UK responsible person to ensure that the local registration requirements are met. Not all devices will be eligible for international recognition. It's looking like this won't apply to certain products such as custom-made devices, in-house devices, some certain software as a medical device which rely on US 510K for approval, and Class 2B implantables and Class 3 devices that rely on equivalence. Potentially as well in the most recent consultation, which is currently ongoing, there's some discussion that self-certified IVDs may not be included in scope either. So the outcome really is to provide a faster, more efficient route to the GB market for international manufacturers while still ensuring that safety and performance requirements are appropriately met. Important to note that whilst this will grant market access, it will not result in a UKCA mark or any kind of certification. And if a manufacturer wants to achieve this, they will still need to go through a separate conformity assessment procedure. So as well as the evolving post-market surveillance requirements and the international recognition routes, the whole of the UK regulatory landscape is going through a period of change. And the MHRA, through previous consultations, has already identified several potential changes which aim to modernise the system while aligning further with global standards. So the key areas of this change really look to be scope extension. So much like with Annex 16 of the EU MDR, the UK is looking to extend the scope to cover products without a medical purpose, which is similar to devices like coloured contact lenses, dermal fillers, for example. And also applying new definitions for medical device and in vitro diagnostic software and software which uses artificial intelligence. There's going to be new classification rules for devices. We don't know exactly what these are going to look like yet, but there's expected to be a reclassification which aligns more with the EU MDR classification rules for devices, and then a new GB specific system for IVD classification has been proposed, and this will be based on IMDRF and IVDR classification. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, this looks like it will mandate quality management system and conformity assessment requirements for IVDs based on risk. So we could see self-certified devices needing a non-accredited QMS, through to devices in the highest classification needing common specifications and specific batch release requirements. In terms of traceability, much like the US and Europe and most international regulatory authorities, the MHRA are looking to move towards unique device identification to give greater requirements to traceability and to further develop a national database for registering devices and ensuring traceability. And that looks to be an evolution of the current UK registration database, but with additional features. In terms of essential requirements, these look to be reformed and updated, align more strongly with the EU MDR Annex 1 general safety and performance requirements, but may include some additional provisions around cybersecurity and around requirements to list allergens and sensitizers. Importantly, with regard to clinical evaluation, much like the EU MDR, expected to be stricter requirements for demonstrating clinical equivalence, with comprehensive data needing to provide to demonstrate biological, technical, and clinical data for all new devices, and a much greater emphasis on clinical investigations for high-risk devices. It's of note that with the international recognition routes, it looks like investigations conducted in other territories could likely be accepted as well. And then cybersecurity is a fast-moving area, and we're likely to see new and specific requirements around that too. And then finally, post-market surveillance, which we've previously discussed. And interestingly, the latest consultation discusses the discontinuation of UKCA marking, which has barely taken off the ground yet. But the suggestion is that rather than marking products with a UKCA mark, they would be marked with UDI, and this would be the way that conformity with the regulations was demonstrated. So the consultation is still ongoing around market access routes and in vitro diagnostics, and I would really recommend any interested parties engage with this to get their opinions taken into account. Moving on to the EU, so we've seen two interesting regulatory changes recently with the adoption of the EU-AI Act earlier this year and a revised product liability directive that was discussed last week. And both of these have a direct impact on MedTech on the EU market. The EU-AI Act by default considers use of AI in most medical device software as high risk, but there is an option to make a documented risk-based argument for reducing this risk. It brings about additional requirements for AI design, development, and employment, and these need to be managed within an appropriate QMS, which it refers to as an AI QMS, although for most medtech manufacturers, this could be brought within scope of ISO 13485. There's also an increased focus on risk management, data governance, and security, and these can already be addressed through state-of-the-art standards in the product lifecycle, like ISO 14971 for risk management, and software development activities based on IEC 6304 and IEC 82304 as well, plus the application of cybersecurity standards and the health software and IT cybersecurity standard IEC 81001-5-1. There will be requirements for more robust technical documentation around AI, and for medical devices, this will form part of the CE technical documentation under the EU MDR and IVDR. There's then a requirement for high-risk AI systems to be conformity assessed, and for medical devices and IVDs, this will most likely be performed by the notified body as part of the CE marking conformity assessment process, with a focus from an AI specialist. Worth noting, there are very large financial penalties for non-compliance and rights to compensation to people who are harmed or damaged by AI systems. And that as well feeds into the Product Liability Directive, which has really been rewritten primarily to include software-based products and AI, and interestingly brings all economic operators into scope for product liability claims. So for medtech, your manufacturers, EU authorized representative, importers, distribution network, and fulfillment providers are all covered. And it infers liability for damages caused when a product is used within its reasonably foreseeable use. So that's just a word of warning and a note for manufacturers to be careful to have a specific intended use statement and not to imply other uses. And what classifies as a defective product? In the sense of the MDR and the IVDR, this will essentially be seen to be those which have failed to meet their Annex 1 general safety and performance requirements. So really, to provide a robust defense against this, manufacturers and economic operators need to be able to present technical documentation and evidence of meeting the GSPRs, i.e. a robust GSPR checklist will be essential for protecting from any liability claims. And again, much like the AI Act, there's a requirement to provide compensation for damages, and this not only includes physical harm, but also psychological harm. Moving on to the US, earlier this year, back in January, there was a final rule published on the Quality Management System Regulation, the QMSR, and this is a requirement because 21 CFR 820.5 states that manufacturers placing finished medical devices on the US market have to establish and maintain an effective quality management system. Currently, this is through compliance to the Quality System Regulation, but the Quality System Regulation is changing to the Quality Management System Regulation, and we're in transition until the 2nd of February 2026. So that change brings with it substantial changes. Where do we stand today? Manufacturers need to continue to comply with the current QSR requirements, and FDA inspections will continue to be held against the Quality System Regulation during the transition period. But compliance with the QMSR will be mandatory from the 2nd of February 2026, and therefore manufacturers need to adapt their quality management system prior to this date. So really, I would address that by being proactive, planning for compliance early to avoid missing that deadline. And a lot, I think, can be learned there from the EU MDR, where there's still a lot of compliance issues because manufacturers have not acted early enough to meet the regulatory changes. It does create a slight extra regulatory burden for manufacturers placing product on the US market, because there's likely an overlap period between the Quality System Regulation and Quality Management System Regulation. So you've almost got to keep a dual compliance activity on the go in the meantime. In terms of ISO 13485, the general basis of the new QMSR is to align more closely with ISO 13485, but they're not a one-to-one alignment, and the intricacies of FDA requirements still need to be included as well. So you cannot rely fully on ISO 13485 compliance, and FDA inspections will need to be carried out as well as ISO 13485 certification for companies which are operating in both the US and the EU markets. Key differences between ISO 13485 and the quality management system regulation are US specific requirements mainly surrounding control of records and e-signatures, unique device investigation, unique device identification, UDI, labeling and packaging inspections, and medical device reporting requirements. Secondly, there's also been a ruling this year surrounding laboratory developed tests. So laboratory developed tests were these in vitro diagnostic products intended for clinical use that were designed, manufactured, and used within a single CLAA high complexity test certified lab. And this was usually a centralized testing model that has been very popular to allow quick deployment and freedom to operate without pre-market submission through a 510K or a pre-market application, and without FDA oversight and GMP compliance requirements. The final rule has applied sweeping changes to this. Laboratory developed tests are no longer afforded FDA enforcement discretion in general, and as a result, many of them will now need to begin the regulatory process for approval as IVD products or systems. The FDA has put in place a phased approach to this over 4 years. So the most pressing matter for now, for May 2025, is to comply with IVD vigilance through medical device reporting, correction and removals, and complaint management files by May 2025. Eventually, most IVD manufacturers will also need to meet market registration requirements and good manufacturing practice requirements for design, development, manufacture, and post-market activities related to their tests. And most laboratory developed tests will require pre-market submission, so either a 510K or PMA, by May 2028. So the real impact here is an increased time to get IVD products to market, increased time in the development cycle without deployment or return on investment, so much higher upfront costs for companies developing IVDs for the US market, and an increased burden of compliance as well, particularly around quality management systems with the good manufacturing practice requirements. There are some total exceptions for certain IVD use cases, and IVDs that are approved by the New York State Clinical Laboratory Evaluation Program, or those which are modified 510K or de novo authorized tests, are exempt from pre-market submissions, but they still need to meet the other requirements such as vigilance, quality management system, complaints, and registration requirements. So finally, it's just worth noting that there's future political uncertainty in the US. It's very early days, and it's hard to see how this will play out in practice. I think what we can say is historically, President Trump has taken a deregulation stance and adopted very pro-business policies. So based on that, it's possible that FDA process could become more streamlined under his second tenure, but with a focus on quicker market access, especially for innovative devices. And this is similar to the Breakthrough Devices program, which was actually brought in, I believe, during the first Trump administration. And then finally, the appointment of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Could be considered opposite to this. I mean, he's promised sweeping FDA reforms, including mass layoffs. There's the media reporting on a lot of FDA disconsent and some news sources predicting mass exodus here. So could this cause approval delays, extension of 90-day 510K review, for example? And also on the flip side, really, his previous political stance has been for increased scrutiny and regulation of the pharma and medtech industry to ensure device safety. So some outlets have predicted increased EU alignment. So we could see delays similar to the MDR and increased regulatory burden. This could be very significant. So Just want to summarise there, conscious of the time. UK manufacturers need to address post-market surveillance changes. Non-UK manufacturers may be able to benefit from expedited access in future, but the final details and timelines are still to be confirmed. Future UK regulation remains very uncertain and there's continued consultation. First draft is expected shortly, and this will provide much needed clarity to the industry. In the EU, manufacturers need to read and understand the EU Act and plan for compliance by 2026. And manufacturers and other economic operators within the EU need to carefully consider their obligations under the revised Product Liability Directive and mitigate any risks. In the US, be aware of changes to the quality management system regulation. Any labs relying on the laboratory developed test route need to prepare to meet GMP and pre-market requirements. And finally, be aware of political uncertainty, which may significantly impact the medtech industry. I believe we may have time for a short Q&A, depending on the flow. Otherwise, I'm happy to take any questions via email after the event, and I will now pass back over to Jay, the host and coordinator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacob, for giving us in-depth analysis, and not that in-depth because of the time, but definitely thank you for sharing your overview insights on what's happening in the EU, UK, and USA. I can see that there are no questions in the Q&A section yet. So I think we will cut through the Q&A part of this and we'll move on to the next speaker. So thank you once again, Jacob. If there would be any questions coming in, I will make sure that I send them to you after the event is done.
Okay, thank you, Jake.
Thanks, Jacob. Thank you once again. Coming back, now I would like to invite Joop Tennis from the Health Tech Enterprise, who will be covering selling overseas a practical guide. Joop, if you would like to introduce yourself and start sharing your screen for the presentation.
Thank you, Jay. Very happy to do that and very happy to meet everyone here today. Let me open my presentation. Assuming you can see this, very happy to speak to you today about general principles of selling your product overseas. My background is as a clinician, trained in Holland, the Netherlands, as a physiotherapist, came to the UK straight after that in the mid-80s and had a 20-year career in the NHS as a clinician and a senior manager, followed by working on entrepreneurship and innovation, setting up a number of incubators in London, and in the last couple of years working as the director of consulting at Health Tech Enterprise, an innovation hub, independent organization helping companies develop new products for particularly the NHS, but also overseas market. I'm acutely aware of time. I will aim to stick within my allotted 10 minutes and we'll skip through a number of slides that I had prepared in order to do so. Either way, they were included, as I understand the slides will be shared as a reference and perhaps further discussion following that. So Health Tech Enterprise, very briefly, organization that works with both NHS clients in the UK, clinicians overseas too, and UK and overseas based companies to bring products to market. We offer a range of advisory services in order to be able to, as successful as you can be, to develop a new product for the healthcare market. And today I'm going to invite you to see yourself as a startup. You may be successful in your own country, delivering services and products to an established market. But when you go overseas, I'm going to suggest that you need to redo most of the work you did to develop your product for the market that you know or are you established in order to make sure you don't make assumptions that will be inappropriate. Very briefly, these are the kind of services that we provide, driving innovation, understanding the evidence you need to bring to bear, and delivering growth and scale in order to be successful, you as a company or as an innovator, but also to improve healthcare more broadly. So I'm going to use the NHS as an example of a market and its complexity, but you could easily sort of transpose that into other markets. The principles still apply. So I'm going slightly back in terms of detail and say, well, what are the general principles you should adopt in order to be successful in a new market. We'll talk a bit about the innovator roadmap and the elements that are part of that you need to revisit, as I said, in order to be successful in a new market. I think in my introduction I promised do's and don'ts, so I'll refresh our memory on those right at the end. So NHS, National Health Service, nowhere near as national as the name suggests. It is, for a start, divided into 4 different countries here in the UK, and each of those areas has its own decision-making bodies. Some of our fellow speakers this afternoon will cover that in more detail, but I just wanted to set the scene that the assumption that this is a cohesive single entry, one front door market is simply not the case. It's very complex, and the same would apply to other countries where you might assume there is a national or a more regional organized system, but in fact, in reality, that's often much more complex. Again, using the NHS as an example, about £200 billion per year being spent now. These are numbers from a couple of years ago, allocated by the Treasury in the UK, and then divided into a number of different pots. So some goes to local authorities, we'll come back to that. Some goes to capital spending. Quite a large part of it, at least half, if not more, commissions services from providers, and that is currently done via integrated care boards. I'm really going to rush through these slides. There is a webinar just on the procurement that might take an afternoon, and I'm not going to cover things in that much detail, but just to show that there is a complex infrastructure for you to understand, in this case of the UK, but other jurisdictions would have similar complexity that you really need to understand so that you can address the right people and understand their priorities, etc. So in that previous slide, you saw that integrated care board, integrated care systems now combine health and social care in the UK, and they commission a significant part of the services. But even in England, the map you see there, there are 42 of these that have their own priorities, as a reference there on the slide that you may visit after the event, where you can see what their priorities are. In order to sell a new product into a new market, or an existing product in your case, into a new market, you really need to understand what the priorities are of those that are going to either use or buy your product. And those are different audiences, and we'll come back to that in a moment. So understanding what they need to achieve in order for you to be able to, A, develop the right product, but also to be able to make a pitch, if you like, to sell and convince those decision makers that your product is going to be essential for them. You need to understand what they are dealing with, what their priorities are. There are some links there to the local policies and implementation plans of some of those bodies in the UK. I will continue to repeat, in the US, this will be similar. It'll be based on insurance companies or those who pay Medicare, Medicaid, of course, as well, and it's a new form of that. But understanding what they are wanting to achieve is essential for you to be successful. Aside from that, the way that healthcare is delivered, as a clinician, I know that the principles of healthcare will be the same more or less universally. We know what we can do. We know how we want to make patients better. But in fact, how that is delivered will change from country to country. In the UK, we have primary care, GP practices, general practitioners, and there are many of those, each of them with independent decision-making powers. So all of those would need to be convinced about your product. There is secondary or tertiary care, which is the integrated care boards I spoke about a moment ago. And there are about 215 of those in the UK, all of which with their own decision-making powers. And then community care, often delivered through local authorities. So again, many different audiences you'd need to consider in order to be successful. I'm going to skip this slide. This is pretty universal. We have growing populations, aging populations. There is complexity and comorbidity. That wasn't the case even 40 or 50 years ago, when patients would die much earlier. Now we are able to treat them, and therefore the complexity of that puts a pressure on each system wherever you are. And we can do so much more. There is an additional capability and knowledge that leads to a tension, one but last bullet point there, between what we can do. We have increased knowledge and increased technology, what patients expect, very well informed these days, and what we can afford in terms of capacity, financially, organizations, facilities and indeed staff resources. So it's essential to make those innovation changes. And if you introduce your product into a new market, making the assertion that your innovation will significantly change the either effectiveness or efficiency of the healthcare that is provided there, then you will stand a reasonable chance. Mentioned the innovators roadmap. So this is what you've been through developing your product for the established market, understanding the issues, having ideation around that, understanding what technology might be brought to bear, getting that clinically proven, regulatory proven, approval, etc., and then sell in your country. You really need to visit almost every element of that for a new market, not make any assumptions that it'll be the same as where you are currently operating. So particular sort of interest of mine is to understand clinical user insights, understand how your technology will be used in that new market. Every country, as I mentioned, will have its specific way of delivering care. I've worked recently with a company from Denmark where the particular health innovation that they had established there worked, but it is actually delivered very differently in the UK, different clinicians, different decision making. So what might be done by a care worker in one country has to be done by a nurse or even a doctor in another. And it's really important to understand those differences. As I mentioned earlier, there is the patient who you'd need to be able to address, the clinician who would use your system, and the payer. And there are sometimes conflicts between those two. So understanding the pathway in that new jurisdiction, that new country you want to enter, is really essential in order to be able to develop the right product and sell it in the right way. Even more important to then seek opinion from outside your circle. Again, not making those assumptions, but seeking advice from those who you haven't already consulted, as it were. And it's important to tailor your message to each of those different audiences. I'm going to skip a number of the following slides, again, leaving them for reference. I mentioned that you'd need to tap into local organizations and decision makers in order to be able to speak their language, as it were, about the product that you want to sell. In the UK, there are national policies decided on nationally, the NHS long-term plan, digital strategy, etc., etc. Then there are regional policies that are related to particular regional decision makers. And again, there are a number of references there. And you might look at your innovation, your technology, addressing either a clinical or a disease-based problem, more operation and financial, particularly for those who are payers or for those who deliver services. And they might be to do with more general policies around population and equality. So then what evidence do you need to bring to bear to those new audiences? Well, the main one is around value proposition. What value can you deliver to that new audience, and what unmet need are you satisfying? Who in that new market are your competitors? And that doesn't mean the same technology. Are there others who do the same as you? But how is the issue that you're addressing particularly dealt with in that other country that you're seeking to enter? There may be alternative methodologies that are not the same as your tech, but actually still address in the eye of the user or the payer the problem in a different way. So they are also your competitors. Really important to be aware of that. What benefit, of course, might you offer, and what evidence, particularly around health economics, a really important and growing element. Do you need to, what evidence do you need to gather? In the NHS, that is particularly around public sector payment. How is this affordable for the public purse? But perhaps in the US, it might be more focused on delivery organizations and insurers. How do they get best value for money? Health economics can deal with both. Just to address that very briefly, health economic analysis, a very important element of evidence around your innovation. It looks at how an existing care pathway is costed, all the elements that contribute to that cost, and how that compares with a new technology-enabled pathway, where elements of the pathway may be taken out or be maybe shorter, or perhaps patients directed in a different way. It's important to do that specific to the country you're wanting to enter. And And it's not sufficient to have clinicians who like your idea. As a clinician, I often came across innovations that I thought were fantastic for my patients, but unless I could convince the finance director that this was affordable and good use of limited resources, I wouldn't go anywhere. So don't underestimate the ability to express your innovation in terms of financial benefits. Linked to that, carbon CO2 modeling now increasingly required in a number of countries, about 20 across the world, essential for new technology to be introduced. And similar waiting list simulation. I'm going to skip these slides. Finally, a few references to the procurement mechanism specific to the UK. And there are 5 or 6 routes that you may want to consider. Again, emphasizing that this is not a single entry point, but there are a number of routes by which you may be able to sell your product. Government tenders and contracts. There are national frameworks that you may need to look at that will speak to the innovation or the technology that you can bring to bear to address those initiatives. There is the NHS supply chain, specific for consumables and common goods, still a small part at the moment, but likely to grow. There may be collaborative purchasing agreements. Probably the most important is understanding how you sell directly to those 215 NHS organizations or indeed GPs and trusts, so that you are able to make your case to those individual organizations. And there are NHS initiatives. I have a few slides that deal with that in more detail. I'm going to skip those by and large. There are tender programs that you may be able to tap into and understand what is currently being invested in. And there are some references there and hyperlinks to the areas where you can find out what those tenders are. There are national frameworks, as I said, and again, some references to that. And there is the NHS supply chain. In this slide, important that at the moment only 40% is being purchased through that on a national basis. Those are consumables and common goods, as they're called. But actually, as a national organization, we do have purchasing power, and it's likely that that will increase to about 80% of those goods. So a really important route into the market. Okay, already over time, so I'm going to just summarize by the do's and don'ts, and I'll reverse that. So I'll do the don'ts first. Don't assume that the way healthcare is delivered in your country is the same as overseas. Really go back to basics and say, what am I addressing? How can my product do that? And that means that your product may not be fit for purpose in that new market in the way that you might have thought. It may be that you need to redesign it. It may be that you need to add functionality that is not necessary in the country you're already established in, but would be required for the new country. And I'm not even touching on regulatory and other elements, of course, as others will do that today. What to do? Consider multiple options. Consider including, and those options would be to establish yourself as a company in that new location, but also look at distributors who are already established with a sales network in that country and may well be able to distribute on your behalf, or even licensing to existing suppliers in that new country where they can use your technology in order to distribute that or to develop that for that local market. As I said, identify national, clinical and policy priorities and develop a sales strategy that is aligned with that. Speak early with regulators and commissioners and understand the reimbursement and decision-making process. I can't emphasize enough that it's not good enough to have a number of clinicians that like your idea. You need to understand who will approve it, who will pay for it, and therefore be able to scale in that country. Understand that local health economic or economic evaluation in order to be successful and tailor your market, your messages accordingly. Very quick whistle stop. I will pause there. Happy to share the slides afterwards and indeed have a conversation with you when the webinar is over in a further occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Job, for enlightening us with the detailed information on selling into international markets. I can see there are no question and answers in the Q&A section right now, but if there would be any, I would like to share them and connect you with the questioning attendee later on after the event is done. Thank you once again. Coming up next, we have Professor Laurie, who is from Red MedTech. Professor Laurie is going to talk about project planning and management for internationalization. Hello, Laurie. If you would introduce yourself and begin your presentation. Thank you.
Certainly. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting me here to speak. So I'm the founder of Red MedTech, and at my company, we help clients with medical device development, compliance, and consulting. So we specialize in design for compliance, and we help companies at all stages of the development life cycle. So they could be startups, they could be spin-outs, and they could be established companies. And we cover all device classifications, types, and technologies in the projects that we deliver. And we offer various bespoke solutions because every project's different, every client is different, every patient cohort is different that we're looking to serve. The helicopter reference here is from one of my clients that described themselves as lost at sea before the Red MedTech helicopter came in and rescued them and got their project back on track. A little bit of background. So I've been in the medtech sector for about 20 years, covering healthcare technologies and engineering, manufacturing and medical devices for that best part of that 2 decades. And so as a company, what we seek to do is serve the developers of medical devices, the designers and the manufacturers as well. Because of my background in design, development, engineering and project management, we deliver a range of solutions for our clients. We cover product development, we cover project leadership and guidance aspects of projects. We cover the quality management systems to ISO 13485, a medical device single audit program, and then we cover the regulatory compliance across those different jurisdictions, because at the end of the day, unless that product is able to comply and achieve certification and gain that market access, then yeah, you're not going to see the revenue that your project deserves. In terms of internationalisation, we're a Welsh-based company and we've delivered to many different global countries. We're up to about 10 different countries and counting, and the portfolio grows every week. So we're covering all the countries in the EU, as well as UK, US, and then the medical device single audit programme countries in particular, such as Japan, Brazil, China, Canada, and so on. So in today's discussion, we're going to be covering these 3 main topics when it comes to planning projects. We're covering your supply and your demand, your fundamentals of development, and your project management principles to get your project on track. So essentially within all of those 4 things, we're covering the technical, development, quality, and regulatory services. In terms of planning, your plan is your structure. So that is a vehicle to help you achieve your project. And you may have an idea, you may have an intent, but unless you've got that project plan, which is your vehicle to metabolize and put into motion those plans that you have and those aspirations, then you're going to have a little more than a wish, really. You need a vehicle, and that's what your project planning is so important for getting your device to market, and when it's on market, keeping it there. So we're going to cover 7 topics. I'm going to cover these quite rapidly because I'm conscious of time, but we're looking at location, patients, product, your competition, your compliance elements. Of course, we said that's key and very important. Also covering your delivery, and then planning principles. Very important. We're talking about internationalization here. So location, where are you planning to put your product and when are you planning to do that? So when we're asking this question, we're looking at what are your target countries, but also more detailed, what particular regions might you be looking to cover? Perhaps what states you might be looking to cover within those countries. And then from that, we're looking at what entry strategy are you looking at? Where are you going to start? Is it all of the countries at once, or is it just a few in particular? So what's your starting point, and what's your overall strategy of the areas and the countries that you're looking to internationalize into? Tied into that, we want to investigate and understand the reimbursement pathways associated with all of these different countries, because they could vary from state to state and from country to country. So we need to get that mapped out first as a foundation activity for the project planning. Patients are key to what we're doing. We wouldn't be in the medical device sector unless it wasn't being driven by meeting the needs of our patients. So what I want us to understand when we're planning projects here is, what does that market look like for those different countries? And I'm not just talking about the countries in what you're going into. I'm looking at the value, so getting some more detail. So what's the revenue value of that particular country that you're looking to expand or enter into? And then further detail again, what does that look like represented as unit value? So how many products are you looking to sell into those countries? Because that's going to be really useful information for us development engineers when we're looking at manufacturing, transfer and scale up quantities designed for manufacture, etc. As well, when it comes to patients, we want to understand the demographics. So what do those patients look like in those different countries? It may be that there might be physical differences between patients that are in one country to another. It could affect the ergonomics of your product design and anthropometrics, for example, if it's a handheld product. Also, we're looking at culture and the cultural understanding. So when it comes to usability and the mental models that are employed for those different patient cohorts, understanding that and being able to map the differences and the similarities between maybe where you've launched before and where you're going to launch next. And then finally, with the user groups, let's understand what they look like and map them thoroughly. We're not just talking about patients here. We're talking about the clinicians that are going to be using your products, and tied to that, who might be the key opinion leaders in those geographic areas. So next is your product. Center stage, it's your solution, it's your MedTech device, but what type of device are you launching? Is it a software for medical device? Is it a medical device at all, bearing in mind that some jurisdictions consider things like wellness products? There could be borderline for these products, so we need to understand and map that thoroughly. Also, we'd like to understand, if you're accessing these different countries, do you want to just transfer your product as it is, or do you need to make some variations or modify the scope of that product family to accommodate the needs of that new market? Finally, looking at the international scope as a general theme, consider things such as your intellectual property, which you may have secured for your specific product designs. Also consider things like translations. Don't underestimate the cost and time involved in getting things like your instructions for use, your packaging, your labeling translated. And bear in mind that even standards themselves might be only available in those other languages as well. So again, we partner with firms to enable that translation work to happen as well. Fourth aspect of project planning is your landscape. So I want to understand with this one is, what's your market share look like? Who are the leaders in that field for that medical device? And who are the innovators? Who's on that leading edge in terms of technology? And then looking at that, where do you fit? What is your unique selling point for your particular medical device solution? That leads us nicely into understanding what the model is for your market entry. Are you going to go direct? Are you selling to patients? Is it over the counter? Or are you going to go through a healthcare establishment network, such as the NHS, for example? Also then, tied in with that is, when we're looking at models for entry, let's have a think about models for exit. So what's your overarching plan? Are you looking maybe for a merger acquisition type deal? Are you looking to license your medical device technology to other major players, perhaps? And also understanding your competitors is, what technology are they using? What is the state of art for the particular area of medical device tech that you're working in? Really understand that and research that as part of your planning. Next, we're going to talk about the compliance. This is key to market access. So we're going to be planning your regulatory strategy, understanding the classification of your products in these different markets, because they're not all the same and they're not always directly transferable. A class 2A in one might not be directly transferable to other countries. It'll vary by jurisdiction. So we're going to want to understand, as part of that, is what is your pathway from getting where you are in space and time through to where you want to be to your market. As part of your regulatory considerations, we're also going to be considering things like your quality management system. And tied in with the outputs of your QMS, you're going to be wanting to evidence safety off the back of your product development. So planning your testing, planning your clinical elements, planning out in detail your design history file, what's going to be involved, and how you transform that then into your technical file, your technical documentation that's ultimately going to be submitted for market clearance. So it's going to go through that audit process, obtain your certification, and then understand the planning requirements and the demands and the timescales associated with registration and what's involved in that as well. So we've talked about demand, let's talk about meeting that demand, and that's with your supply chain. So we're looking at planning who your vendors are going to be and what roles they're going to play within your project, who your economic operators are going to be. You're going to need authorised representatives. How well equipped is your team and your resourcing? Are you going to need somebody such as Red MedTech that will help you as a UK responsible persons, or perhaps persons responsible for regulatory compliance? Also, in terms of supply chain, considering your logistics. So everything from your medical device, packaging, that needs designing, that needs engineering, it needs testing. How are you going to store your product to get it from where it is in storage and manufacturing over to the countries that you're planning to enter? That ties nicely in with the distribution channel. So mapping that out as part of your project planning process so that you've got that ahead of time. And it doesn't stop there once it's in the market. You're looking at post-market obligations as well. You'll have most likely responsibilities for surveillance and regulatory reporting, including things like adverse events, etc., and part of your monitoring and vigilance exercises. So we want to see that you've planned, at least procedurally, to have something like that that covers those topics in place as part of your development process and your quality management system, and you've included that in your project planning activities. Okay, and then some principles on project planning, project management. It's all about the delivery. Timelines, we want to see consideration of your critical path and what activities you can run in parallel to reduce that critical path. Look at the activities and the dependencies of those different activities. Now that'll lead you to consider resourcing. What people have you got on your team, and what partners might you want to involve to reasonably get your project on track and maintain it on track? So need to have a look at what necessary skills, experience and knowledge you're going to want to bring to your project. And then also resourcing is not just about people, it's also about the funding and the financial resources that you might need to take those next steps and to work through all of those different phases of the project to complete each one systematically and get your product into those international markets. Once you've done your planning, you will ultimately get to the end. So what I want you to do is define what success looks like before you begin your project, and also consider what you're going to do afterwards. So what is your new product development pipeline look like? Or are you going to maybe look for portfolio and growth, or moving on to the next internationalization country that you're targeting? And definitely, most importantly, celebrate your successes along each stage of your project planning. So I realised that was really rapid, really quick. I sort of whistle-blow tour of project planning. We're here to support you throughout all stages of that development life cycle. There's a lot to consider. There's a lot going off. It's very multifaceted. And if you've got quite a sophisticated device, there's lots to think about, as well as the internationalization aspects. So we're here to assist your company directly with those levels of expertise. Just give us a call. I'd be happy to answer some questions afterwards, or reach out to me if you want a free 30-minute consultation with myself. I'd be happy to discuss your project with you.
Thank you so much, Laurie, for sharing your insights. We do have a question from Karina, who is asking, we have a class 1 medical device exempt of 510K. Do you know how long it will take for us to register with FDA, and what will be the cost of registration? Do we need to cover the requirements in quality manual?
Okay, so what I'd want to do is have a look at exactly the state of your documentation first and foremost, and actually assess how ready you are to take those steps in registering the product. There are user fees, they do change annually. You'll be able to find that information on the FDA website. And so if you type user fees there, also consider things like your establishment registration. So it might not be as straightforward depending on where your company is and geographically and where it's registered. There might be a few other fees that you'd need to consider in addition to just simply putting in your submission and registering it. So what I'd probably want to do is probably have a chat with you after the webinar and look at your particular circumstances. So sorry, I can't give an exact one, but there's not a one size fits all with with any product, to be honest. It'll depend very much on the technology you're employing, where you are as a legal entity, and so on, and the maturity of your technical file. If there's any gaps, I'd want to get those resolved before we start forecasting, actually talking to the FDA.
Okay, thank you so much, Laurie. I hope that answers your question, Karina. You do have Laurie's email and website details on the screen right now. It would make sense to take a screenshot and contact her later on after the end of this webinar. Well, thank you once again, Laurie, for sharing your insights. If there will be any questions coming up, I will pass them on after the event. Another information for the attendees, please feel free to use the Q&A section and the chat box to get your questions answered by our speakers. Coming up next, we have Benjamin Roberts, who is also known as Ben, quite famously. He is from the MedLink Midlands, and he will be talking about collaboration and networking essentials. Hello, Ben, if you would like to introduce yourself and share your screen with the presentation.
Yes, I'll just do that now. Slideshow. There we go. Is that good? Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Perfect. So my name's Ben Roberts. I'm an innovation advisor here at MediLink Midlands. The doctors from my PhD, which I studied at the University of Warwick, I was researching biomedical research. I was doing biomedical research, trying to investigate drug delivery into the brain. But my time in academia kind of taught me that there is seemingly quite a big gap sometimes between research and the actual impact that is being studied. So I was keen when I finished to get more involved in the sort of innovation, delivery, and translational side of things, which is exactly what MediLink do. They kind of help companies support. We support companies trying to kind of actually have the impact that they know that their technology or research can do. So just before I jump into kind of collaboration, a little kind of backstory on MediLink Midlands, the company. We're a health and life science kind of association with 20 years of experience as the Midlands region as specialists and a not-for-profit provider. So our success comes from regional success. And you can see here that two of the main ways in which we're able to help companies is through connectivity and collaboration. It's very kind of cliche to say, but we believe that the sum of the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. And actually being able to kind of work together and form innovative partnerships really does help kind of accelerate innovation. We have lots of kind of ways of supporting companies, all the way from funding through to access. But you'll see a lot of these kind of link back to that collaboration and connectivity aspect. So strategic alliances to maximize opportunities, collaboration across academic, business, clinical and government, but also global opportunities. And even things like diversification in and out of sectors and knowing when that's possible and also the best routes to kind of take that. Our kind of network is very regional focused, but also looks into different aspects. So, I mean, the Midlands region has a fantastic kind of academic network, lots of universities, lots of kind of world-leading universities as well, plus medical schools. We've got some great businesses in this space and service providers all supporting the innovations and innovators coming up. And what we try and do is connect all of these and really make sure that everyone is able to kind of access them and take the support and wealth of knowledge and expertise from here. We have started to kind of expand internationally, and obviously that's what this webinar is about, is looking into those routes. And we've started to form partnerships and relationships across the globe. Recently, I was lucky enough to go out to China and learn about kind of opportunities when expanding across there. We've had quite a long relationship with the USA in the city of Mentor, and actually just across the border now into Toronto and Canada as well. And just kind of having those connections already there, that sort of soft landing, can really help kind of increase the likelihood of success when looking to access these global markets. So I was just going to give a very kind of quick talk today around the sort of power of collaboration in MedTech, some considerations, some of the ways to improve this, and also the main benefits that kind of come from it. So I think the first one to kind of discuss is the considerations and collaboration, and just something that is always important, and it's just things like intellectual property protection and conflict of interest management. One thing I've learned when it comes to IP is whenever you're getting any work done or collaborations, whether it's with a university, a service provider, or kind of other delivery partner, ensuring that contracts, NDAs, and things like that, so that the intellectual property is either shared or is protected moving forward. Non-disclosure agreements as well, for when you're kind of giving away any sort of trade secrets or patentable or intellectual property. If it's not something you've looked into loads, there is some good resources online, things like One NDA, which have good resources put together by kind of experts in this field, which just can give you a bit more confidence if you want to ask specific questions about technology, but don't want to give away too many secrets about your own innovation or your own kind of plans. And then the last part of that is just things like fairness and equity, just ensuring that like there is equal opportunities and benefits through these kind of partnerships, as well as respect for things like cultural differences and diversity and inclusion, which we're seeing becoming more and more important in this space. So how do you build these relationships? I mean, one of the most obvious ways is through industry conferences and events. Whether it's a big global event with 300-400 delegates, or whether it's just a small one, then they can be super useful for broadening your network and participating in panel discussions, workshops, just to kind of hear a bit more about the space. I mean, like I've already learned loads today. This is kind of testament to how having a good network can really answer all the questions that you might have and might not even have yet, and preempt things like that. Professional organizations such as Medidia, such as Medilink, that can help identify the best kind of routes to collaboration. They might know who else is working in this space, who else might be able to support you, who you could partner with, who might be able to offer sort of channels. And I think one of the important things to take from that is finding one that will sort of champion you when you're not in the room as well. So like if they go to a separate event, or if they're speaking to another company, that will think of you. And I think that's why things like elevator pitches can be so important, not only for you to sell your company, but for somebody else to understand it and be able to pass on that message, meaning that if they're ever in an opportunity speaking to someone that is looking for companies or is able to support, they can begin the discussion and hopefully introduce you at a later date. Things like social media platforms, obviously very useful, particularly when you're looking into sort of direct consumer innovations. But then even just taking into consideration things like active listening. So when you hear there's a problem, instead of immediately jumping to, I have a solution for that, actually asking why there is the problem, how that problem is affecting people, and kind of learning about the needs and challenges and goals of these people or organizations or healthcare institutes. So not just jumping in that, oh, I know exactly what will solve this, actually hearing what the major challenges are and how that can be addressed can really help kind of build trust, which is the final point. Obviously the transparency and honesty, which kind of helps create that advocate for you moving forward. And I guess the final thing on this would also be kind of once you build trust, once you've actively listening and building these networks, always kind of ending the conversation with, who should I speak to next? Who else is in your network that I could speak to that would be able to support us or help us reach our goals? And you'll find that things like that can be insanely powerful moving forward. And then obviously the benefits through innovation acceleration that come from all of this, diverse perspectives telling you the way that your solution could be used, or other kind of even other markets for it. Recent examples were one person that was looking into going into the NHS, but actually we thought that there's probably more commercial opportunity for them in certain global markets instead, where they could go potentially make a bit more money and then come back to the NHS and take on that beast with a bit more funds, with a bit more weight behind them. So opportunities like that, shared resources, webinars like this for knowledge sharing, shared resources are brilliant. I've already learned a lot about MHRA and this sort of changes through that. Risk mitigation, I think, was covered quite a lot in the last presentation as well. It's collaborating, it's hearing in webinars like this, it's speaking to the people at conferences. The enhanced market access. This can be when you kind of find partners or collaborators that are already selling into markets. They might already have the channels, they might already have the networks, or they might be able to enhance your kind of offering. If they have the solution to problem A and you have the solution to problem B, is that something that could be sold together, work together, and kind of partner, and then create these synergistic partnerships? So yeah, it was a very quick talk that. I think my contact details will be around, and I'm happy to take any questions now. But I think that's the main focus of obviously partnership. So yeah, ask who you should speak to next, things like that. Make sure you're attending events, make sure you're chatting to people and giving translatable pitches so others like Medilink can advocate for you when you're not in the room as well.
Thank you so much, Ben, for sharing these interesting details. One important point to highlight would be Medidia is also part of the Medilink Midlands, and along with us, many of the presenter companies today who have collaborated with us are also members of the Medilink Midlands network. So we do enjoy our membership with the Medilink Midlands and all the events that they are organizing. I guess Jacob was just there last evening for the winter networking session at RAF, and he enjoyed his time.
Yeah, brilliant. Good to hear.
Okay, thank you so much, Ben. I don't see any more questions that have come in, but if there would be any questions, I would be happy to pass them through after the event is done.
Do.
Yeah. Thank you once again, Ben, for joining in and sharing your insights. Up next, we have David Warwick from EG Technology, who will be talking about technical due diligence. Hi, David. Would you like to introduce yourself and share your slides?
Hi, yeah, sure. Thanks very much for having me. Hopefully everybody can see my slides now. Yeah, so I'm David Warwick, one of the directors here at EG Technology. We're a product design and development consultancy based in Cambridge in the UK, and the vast majority of our work is in medical device development, in vitro diagnostics, and those kind of health and wellness type applications which sit on that boundary of medical devices and other things. But what I want to really cover today is we also find ourselves doing quite a lot of technical due diligence, sort of helping people establish where they are in their development programs, helping investors look at companies who they are thinking of investing into, and making sure that their development plans for taking things forward are coherent and reasonable. But another aspect to this really is to hopefully give you some ideas, if you're an innovator yourself, as to how you can maybe use some of these techniques for a bit of self-reflection and consideration on an internal basis as to where your product development is and where you go next. So technical due diligence can be carried out at any point in the development. Perhaps the key objective is to develop a clear and often you want an independent understanding of the current state of the work that you're doing. Generally speaking, this kind of review is intended to unearth the next highest priorities and the areas of technical risk, whilst also taking a high-level view of the overall program to ensure that your plan development has the best chance of running smoothly. You want to make sure that you're going to hit your key milestones and that you're delivering on your target objectives, and these, of course, are particularly important for investors. Technical due diligence is often undertaken by potential investors as part of their broader due diligence work on any company they're looking to put money into. But as I said a moment ago during this talk, I want to encourage you to think about how the technical reviews and gap analysis techniques that I'm discussing could be useful as part of an integral part of your product development program. At the start of a technical due diligence exercise, it's a good idea to frame the questions that you want answered and then take a broad sort of holistic view of the proposed development program to identify any further areas that might require a deep dive. This will enable you to focus on those areas of high technical risk or to identify explicit gaps in the development programming. Identifying those gaps is really the first step in developing risk mitigation strategies, and a typical output of any due diligence exercise is a summary report detailing the assessment that is carried out, together with building up some of those recommendations for next steps. The technical due diligence work that we undertake is usually time bound. It's not necessarily about producing a comprehensive line by line list of precise steps, because hopefully many of those will already be on the development plan. It is, as I've said, about making sure that the most significant risks have been identified and properly considered. It's also common to link this sort of scope of any due diligence to the current state of development and answering the question, really, how do I get from where I am now to my next key milestone? So making sure that your short to medium term plans are definitely going to be achievable. Knowing where you are is important because product development and bringing a medical device to market is complicated and involves multiple simultaneous work streams. In a sense, that's why we've got all the people talking today. All aspects of this development needs to be progressed in parallel. So it's not just about designing prototypes. It's ensuring you've got your appropriate strategy in place for clinical evaluation, how you're going to commercialize your product, how you're going to protect it, along with answering other practical questions like who's going to manufacture this for me, or have I got or am I going to have all of the documentation I need for my technical file so that I can make my regulatory submission or get ethics approval for my clinical trial. For investors, one of the key questions is normally around the level of confidence in that development plan. They're looking for reassurance that the steps you've outlined are reasonable and have appropriately considered the time and budget associated with those steps. The temptation is often really to minimize those costs. It's to not to ask for enough money, to be maybe over optimistic on those time and costs, but our experience is that investors are really looking for plans that are credible and have a realistic chance of success. So while of course there'll be pressure to see what can be achieved within some sort of limit on time and budget, in our experience, what they really want to know is that the team appreciate the challenges of getting a medical device onto the market. And if you can provide a reasoned justification for why a particular phase is going to take time and that you acknowledge the development risks, this is often seen as a positive rather than a negative. It shows that you understand what you're doing. And the same is true for grant applications, really. We've seen and reviewed many applications for grants which are over optimistic or occasionally over pessimistic, to be honest. And reviewers are generally quite adept at spotting when your plan isn't realistic. So ensuring that plan gets you from A to B is really key. Whether you're still in an early proof of feasibility stage, or whether you're benchtop testing, or you've already got a more developed product design, peer-led design reviews are another key part of the product development process. It is another way that you can spot gaps in your development program, using internal or external resource to get a fresh perspective on the development. It's an opportunity really to assess the design outputs, optimal prototyping methods and test methods that you're going to use based on where you are in your development journey, and confirm the purpose of the prototypes that you might be making or testing that you're undertaking at each stage of development. A peer review can provide a really useful independent insight into your project and sort of help pull the development team out of the weeds of the day-to-day technical development, reminding them of the big picture with an assessment of how the design work that they're doing aligns with the development path for user testing, reliability testing, and eventually things like compliance testing and transition into volume manufacturing. Again, the size and scope of transfer to manufacturer activities is another aspect of development that's often overlooked or underestimated. The scope of any transfer to manufacturing assessment will depend on a range of factors, including target volumes, capabilities of your manufacturing partner, and the cost sensitivity of the end product. The activities you might undertake for your transfer to manufacture or the transfer to manufacture of a high-end, high-value lab analysis system produced in relatively low volumes is going to be very different from those for a single-use, high-volume, low-cost target disposable. So again, as part of the development process, we're always encouraging people to start early stage discussions with potential manufacturing partners as soon as you've got a design that's sufficiently representative of production intent. While volume production might still be a way off, it's another useful tool in identifying any potential gaps in your development program and making sure you've taken all of the opportunities you can to smooth the transition into manufacture down the road. A gap analysis is another popular technique which can focus on specific areas of technical compliance, particularly within medical device development. There'll be a range of standards that you need to comply with and evidence that you need to gather. Formal assessment by an accredited test house or a notified body can be expensive and time consuming. So to stay within the rules, you'll need to be, or for them to stay within the rules, you'll often find that they're not able to offer advice if they're conducting a formal audit. So less formal pre-compliance assessment can be invaluable in an earlier stage of development in spotting any gaps and give you at least a degree of confidence in your submission before you start that expensive and time-consuming process. Finally, really, technology readiness levels are a method of estimating the maturity of your development, frequently used in relation to investment and grant funding to enable consistent discussions around technical maturity across different types of technology. The TRL system was originally developed by NASA, but it's now adopted across a wide range of industries and is common in medical device development. So whether you're developing a medical device, a lab instrument, or a monitoring solution within health tech, an assessment of your technology readiness level provides a widely recognized baseline for a credible product development plan with realistic times and budgets. And so actually we've put together a free online resource, which again, there's a link in the slides that will be circulated later, or a QR code on the screen there. A free resource that allows you to conduct your own self-assessment of your technology readiness level. What we've done to build that out is, rather than focusing on a single headline number, the self-assessment really asks you to review the current status of your development across a range of metrics, bearing in mind all of those interrelated activities that I showed in my earlier slide. So Our TRL assessment covers areas such as product design and development, human factors, risk management, verification and validation, regulatory and quality, clinical, commercial, and assessing your readiness level at each of those to give you a kind of a combined score. So if you remember back to my earlier slide, a successful product development plan really needs to make sure all of those activities are progressing at broadly the same level. And as I said at the start, whether you're developing a clear understanding of where you are, where you're trying to get to, and an appreciation of the steps required to get there, that's really key to a successful product development, and in convincing key stakeholders, including investors, to support you on that journey. I haven't seen whether any questions have arrived in the chat, but yeah, happy to. My contact details are on screen and again provided in the slides later. So if anybody wants to get in touch, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, David, for sharing your insights on technical due diligence. I do not see any questions coming in. So I think it's good time to move on to the next speaker, being conscious of time as well. Thank you once again, David. Next speaker with us is Martin from Newham, and he will be talking about go-to-market strategies in the UK, USA, and MD-SAP regions. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Great stuff. So yeah, today I'm going to be talking about go-to-market strategies, and I'm going to focus on user research and service design. So just a quick little bit about me. I'm the managing partner at Newham. I started as a software engineer, but got 20 years of experience in strategic design and digital innovation. I specialize in go-to-market strategies, market entry, and product development for regulated markets. And currently, a lot of my work is in with MedTech companies, securing NHS adoption, scaling in the US and APAC. I'm also an investor and a co-founder of an AI company as well. So my details are there. If anyone wants to connect with me, I'm quite active on LinkedIn as well. So I'm mindful of time, and there's quite a lot of secret sauce and tips that I could probably give you. So feel free to reach out if you want to learn anything further. And you can see the range of services that we support at Newham today. And like I said, I'm going to focus on research and service design in terms of helping you with go-to-market strategies. And I'm going to work through a couple of examples as well. So we'll look at these two example clients, both which are sort of research and service design, which was critical for them to navigate market entry. And our approach always starts the same. If we're looking at building or designing new technology or looking how to expand into a new market or home market, we use design thinking in everything we do, from building technology to creating marketing strategies, because ultimately we want to save time and money, and design thinking allows us to do that. So looking into research and service design, some of the key challenges that you guys face at the moment, which obviously a lot of people are covering today: navigating regulated markets, identifying the right entry points across diverse regions and health systems, gaining adoption of your solutions and tools, and validating pricing and product market fit, and addressing obviously those cultural, political, and regional barriers as well. And user research allows us to identify sort of the specific needs and behaviors and the challenges, especially with MedTech stakeholders, to shape effective market-ready go-to-market strategies. And powered with service design, it allows us to align with those MedTech solutions, user workflows, and regulatory demands, ensuring there's like seamless sort of adoption and long-term success in those markets. So a few points here of how they sort of work together and can help. Sort of, it allows us to uncover those regional differences. As discussed, understanding regional differences, uncovering regional differences, should I say, and then understanding regional differences, understanding regulatory compliance, so how research shapes messaging that resonates with those local priorities, while service design ensures value is delivered at every touch point. And then validating price and market fit, which seems to be the big one at the moment. And I will go through a case study with Amplify AI that we worked with recently. So the research provides sort of insights into, I guess, perceived value, so the value prop, and then sort of pricing expectations, because it's going to be different in different markets. while the service design process allows us to test that and then refine those strategies as well. And obviously identifying entry points, which a couple of people have covered today, and those early adopters and those partnerships as well. And then obviously each region is slightly different, so tailoring the value prop to those new markets, because as people have said today, not every market is the same. So the key takeaways is user research and service design aren't just methods, they really are critical tools for navigating not just product development, but also actual marketing strategies as well when entering new markets. So Amplify AI, which is an example that we worked with recently. So they're an AI tech company who have a cutting-edge AI-driven diagnostics platform, which uses AI thermal sort of imagery, and they wanted to expand in the MENA region and the US in particular as well. So the team lacked a lot of clarity on how to price the product, segment their customer groups, and address those sort of competitive landscapes. And they wanted to obviously reach out to scale and reach out to us to sort of get that US market entry. And as you can see on the screen here, the key obstacles: lack of clarity, no validated pricing strategy, and sort of navigating the regional market complexities as well. So the strategic approach that we took was addressing sort of the unique challenges. And we used a sort of process where we did obviously qualitative research. So we started with conducting deep interviews, key stakeholders, early adopters, and potential customers in both regions, and really speaking to them on a one-on-one basis and analyzing that data as well. And this process allowed us to uncover critical pain points and understand how their product could really align with those regional priorities. So, for example, in the MENA region, the Gulf states, the focus was on more of a personalized engagement, where obviously in the US, the ROI metrics are more significant. And then in terms of the pricing strategy, one of the big issues was defining what that was. So it was a balance between affordability and perceived value in those markets. And the research allowed us to really delve into developing a real clear pricing framework that we were able to meet customer expectations while differentiating them from the competition that they had in that market. So this strategy established their pricing as a USP, but also ensured they could scale sustainably. And we validated the market entry strategies as well, specifically to those dynamic markets of the MENA and US regions. And this involved factoring obviously political, which is regional as well, over in the US, state differences as well, to allow they had a more effective and compliant approach. So the outcome that they had was they were clear entry points from that research and approach identified for the region. Value prop was obviously aligned specifically for those regions, and validating those pricing strategies, and all done sort of using that more deep research, insight driven, and then obviously using sort of a service design approach. So the next one and the last one that we just kind of talked through is Preventex, who are a leading healthcare provider of at-home medical testing kits in the US and UK. And our approach with them was sort of, they faced a complex sort of challenge of entering the NHS. As you know, obviously highly regulated, and sort of entry points are difficult. Our approach was to combine a service design principles and engage with stakeholders, just for them to find out how they could align and meet regulatory requirements and meet NHS priorities as well in particular. So we use the service design approach where we work closely with NHS stakeholders and local trusts to co-create solutions tailored for their specific needs. And then we focus on a particular health condition, in this instance, Hep C, which was a priority for the NHS, and ensure that the product directly addressed their priorities, and it was more likely to gain sort of traction. And this co-creation process not only built trust, but also ensured there was a solution that was practical and impactful as well. So stakeholder engagement was early engagement with those end users, allowed us to validate those, validate the solution before sort of significant investment was made in actually the tech development side of it as well. And it was an iterative feedback loop, which had enabled us to refine the approach, ensuring it was aligned with expectations and workflows of the NHS teams. And we involved all sort of stakeholders. So it wasn't just NHS and the trusts, we involved the patient advisory groups as well as part of that. So we co-created an entire solution. So we engaged with sort of patient advisory groups who are in this sort of field. And then in terms of requirements, we work through NHS GDS standards, and we collaborated with NHS England and like the patient advisory groups to ensure the sort of full compliance as well. And it was critical, like I said, in terms of building confidence and addressing compliance very early on, so we didn't have any delays when we were developing the technology. And the combined approach of this co-creation, early engagement, and compliance alignment allowed Preventx to establish themselves quite early on with the NHS, and then obviously build out that technology in relationship with other trusts as well. So it got quite a lot of fanfare when we launched. We got some coverage on the BBC, obviously aligning it with a need that the NHS were looking at solving. We were able to get some, I guess, free PR out of it as well. And obviously working with the GDS standards and working with the NHS and the patient advisory groups, we were able to sort of partnership on that as well. So it was allowed us to actually get quite a lot of people coming through the service and using the system in the health kit, which obviously was a big bonus for those guys because it was getting more people into the healthcare system that were probably misdiagnosed or not diagnosed. So just a quick recap, very rushing through this, but like I said, if anyone wants any more information, happy to have a chat afterwards. So just quick recap, start with the users. Conduct a qualitative research to uncover real needs and pain points. Whichever region you go to, you just have to do the work again. Engage with stakeholders and early adopters to validate those approach. Leverage service designs to collaborate with stakeholders to co-create solutions that meet those regulatory requirements and user needs, and then use iterative testing to refine and align your strategy. As mentioned, tailor for regional markets. Try and be flexible, validate early and often, and try and do it as cheap as possible. Use data obviously to inform those decisions, but also speak to people is the most important thing as well. Don't make assumptions. And be agile. And I know that's difficult when you're spending money sometimes and you've got a product, but you just need to be, especially with a strategy, marketing strategy, building those scalable strategies and campaigns is a necessity, especially in an evolving market with different demands. So that's been a whistle-stop tour of user research and service design. You can scan that QR code and it will add me to LinkedIn or take me to my LinkedIn, but my details are there. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Martin, for giving us a very quick overview on how to begin with your go-to-market strategy and getting all of these innovations into different markets. I do not see any questions in the Q&A section and no comments. So if they come in, I will pass them through to you via email. So thank you once again, Martin, for joining in. Coming up next, we have our next speaker, which is Tammy Holmes from the Health Innovation West Midlands, and she is going to talk about leveraging support networks in the UK. Over to you, Tammy.
Okay, so hopefully you can see my presentation, and thanks for having me today. So it's absolutely brilliant to hear some of the information today from the organisations that can help, but often it's really difficult to understand kind of who's out there, who can help, and also it's difficult to understand we don't know what we don't know. So I'm going to talk to you today about how you can leverage some of the support networks in the UK. And you'll notice I'm from an organisation that's called Health Innovation West Midlands, but actually, as you will see, I'm from a kind of a bigger network of networks. So this is very much going to look at it from kind of a UK perspective. I've been muted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so this slide demonstrates what the NHS looks like. So we've heard already that the NHS is complicated. We've heard that the NHS, our health system in the UK, isn't just provided by the National Health Service. We have very much a broader health and social care infrastructure, which is quite complicated. And as you'll see from here, we have got integrated care boards, which have been mentioned today, but also there's a multitude of other organisations, including my own, that have been funded by the government to try and support the innovators and the health and social care system to really innovate at pace and scale, and to reduce that need to keep testing and remove that kind of not invented here. So the first message really that I want people to understand is that we have a bigger structure than the NHS. It's not just the NHS, it is health and social care. It's not just provider organisations, but ultimately we're not one organisation, but we are a multitude of organisations really driving that kind of health and wealth for our region. So it's more of a school of fish than a whale. But it's really difficult to understand who you should engage with. And we've already heard about the integrated care system, and it is often the multi-million-dollar question, and it really depends on your innovation. It's likely to be the integrated care system, but actually sometimes it takes a lot of time to understand who that is and time to engage. So it's really difficult to really find out, especially when you're coming from a different country inside. And the West Midlands, just to give you a kind of narrow that down, that integrated care board and that kind of integrated care system down, just in the West Midlands alone, we have 6 integrated care boards. So that system is replicated over 6 different geographical areas, all of which have got very different needs. Within the West Midlands, we not only have sort of cities with universities and small areas with high populations, but we also have very rural organisations. So each area is very, very different. So who can help you navigate it? Now, luckily, as I've mentioned, there are a multitude of networks within the system that I'm going to sort of chat to you about today. And one of them is the Health Innovation Network. So I am from Health Innovation West Midlands, and ultimately we are a network of networks. We were set up 10 years ago. There are 15 of us, all covering the retrospective regional areas across the UK. And unlike some organisations and some networks, we actually are fully embedded within our local health and research ecosystem. So I myself are actually NHS employed, although I sit slightly outside of the healthcare service to be able to act as that honest broker. And what we have been set up to do is to really drive that kind of pace and scale of innovation right from the discovery right through to the deployment. And we work on a bit of a push and pull model. So we look for solutions that are out there, that are ready to deploy, that the NHS should be looking for, but also we worked actively with our provider trusts and our ICBs to actively look for challenges where they actually need solutions. So you've seen this before in a few other people's presentations. So we do work within an innovation pathway, and we do work right through from the discover deployment. And what we've done is we've actively started to work with networks within the region, with organisations within the region that provide support and services at each of these stages, and really work with the system to understand how we can reduce that need to be able to do that time and time again. As an organisation, we are very much here to lead through communing. So we work across academia, industry and healthcare. And what we do is we pull together people from across those sectors to actually try and have one voice and understand what those challenges are. We're very much here to be able to deliver at pace and scale. And while we're not a funding organisation, we do have access into funding pots and expertise that can really support and plug that gap, not only for innovators who need the support with discovering and developing, but also at an implementation and a deployment level from an NHS and healthcare perspective. A lot of our teams within each of the health innovation networks, some of them are still actively clinical, some of them are still NHS employed, and they actually have the expertise to be able to support and really drive that, and the experience to be able to drive that forwards. We're also looking at the sort of supporting the workforce. Time and time again, we often see innovations and solutions that come to us that are brilliant for the NHS, but we've heard today often the NHS isn't ready for it. And part of that is about making sure that the workforce is actually ready. And we talk about kind of digital practitioners and things like that. And there's a lot of organisations and a lot of roles within healthcare system that have changed over the years. And part of our remit is really to support the healthcare sector to get those roles ready. So going back to kind of networks, we are a network of networks. We're not here to redo. We're not here to kind of sort of recreate the world. We very much look to capitalise and understand what individuals and organisations need to come together to drive and support innovation, right from that idea through to implementation. And we link into a number of organisations and a number of different types of networks, right through from user networks. We are actively involved in some of the priority areas within our organisations. Some health innovation networks actively sit on some of those user groups if they've got a portfolio of innovations or portfolio projects within that area. Adopters, we have our ICBs and some of our provider units actually sitting on our boards. We sit on some of the specialist groups. I myself has been invited to the Estates and Facilities ICB group within Coventry. But we also work with accelerators. You'll have seen our logo on some of the presentations today. We sit with the West Midlands Health Technology Innovation Accelerator. We sit on some of the universities and some of the service boards, but also we have some of our own specialist clinical and topic specific networks. We're actively involved with our clinical research networks who have access to a variety of clinical expertise, and also our applied research collaboratives who have similar but more in that kind of applied research. And similarly, we also have links into some of our ICB boards and things like that. So this slide just demonstrates some of the networks, and again you will see that there's been some of these you will see Medlink Midlands, obviously we've heard from already today, but we bring together people to be able to broaden access and provide a point of contact for innovators and adopters to be able to access those expertise without kind of recreating it. So by having one point of contact, you get a point of contact with all the different points of contacts. The other thing I just wanted to go into briefly is just to give you a bit of an idea of some of the other networks and services that are going on within the UK that can support. So the National Innovation Service is an innovation service that the Health Innovation is actively involved in. We are actually involved in coordinating and signposting out to the respective organisations. And essentially this provides a centralised record for your innovation. So what this is trying to do is trying to reduce the need to fill out multiple forms when you're going to different health and social care organisations. It accesses advice and guidance through experts in our health innovation networks, but also through these. And this is actually becoming the central portal for NICE and access through to the sort of NICE, the ETAs and the NICE guidance. It's a free service initially, but that can also provide you access to other expertise and practical support, really from startup right through to established enterprises and even sort of larger farmers. Another example of a network that the health innovation networks are actively involved in is the secure data environments. Now this is specifically looking at the West Midlands secure data environment, but actually there are 12 across the UK that they're still being set up, but they have been set up to manage access to health and social care data. So this provides access to information to be able to test and try out some of those solutions, and it's actually real live data that can be used. So it's still new, but it's about actually providing that network of data that you can go to as a point of contact to be able to test some of those solutions. Another area that's where networks are really starting to come together, and again this is a local example, but there are a multitude of these across the UK, is where ICBs and academia and sort of charities are all coming together within smaller geographical areas, particularly around the ICP areas, to actually come together to understand how they can innovate and speed up that innovator. So Sherpa is particularly around Stafford, Stoke-on-Trent, Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, Health and Care Research Partnership. But you'll see there from the long list of those organisations, by being able to access Sherpa, you're accessing a wider community. And this is just one example. We've got multiple in the West Midlands, including Birmingham Health Partners, and there are others that other health innovation networks are also actively involved, which hopefully reduces that time taken to sort of knock on some of those doors. I am kind of sort of whistle stop touring through this because I think some of the information is kind of already been shared, and my main kind of message today is that there are networks and people coming together to help you to reduce that time to knock on that door and identify that expertise. But this just gives you a bit of an idea as a health innovation network as a whole, sort of the size of things that we work with. So last year we worked with sort of nearly 5,500 companies, either accessing us directly through the National Innovation Service, through our ICBs, or just kind of from our website. And we're very much looking for that kind of economic growth to support companies, but also with that overall health impact. I am aware I have kind of rushed through that, but I think my sort of main message for this is that as a UK, the government is very much trying to support bringing together organisations to reduce the time taken from an innovation coming to us to be getting onto the sort of patient floor. Health innovation networks are one organisation that can help really be match made to some of the other organisations in here. And I suppose from this sort of workshop today, if you do have an innovation and you are unsure about what sort of support you need, or you're an organisation that offers support and you're kind of looking to make sure that your service is out there, then just drop us an email.
Thank you so much, Tammy, for giving us the information. I'm sure it might be of quite advantage to all our viewers and attendees. Again, there is no question in the question and answer section, so we'll be moving on to our next speaker. And next up, we have Charles, who is the CEO of Digital Health and Care Alliance. And Charles will be talking about health software compliance and ISO 82304 implementation. Hi, Charles, if you would like to share your screen and introduce yourself and begin the presentation.
Right. Hello, everybody. I am the Chief Executive of Digital Health and Care Alliance, otherwise known as DACA. We're a 1,200 member organisation. We're free to join. Our main output is a tri-monthly newsletter. So welcome if you want to join us. What I want to talk about today is what MedTech needs to do to grow big. My contention is that it needs an infrastructure that enables patients to access tech like meds. So in other words, if you've got an app that can make you less anxious, and you've got a drug that can make you less anxious, patient choice should be such that it's as easy to get the app as it is to get the medication. And currently, of course, that's not the case. To support that, you need an evaluation system with a single verdict. And finally, you need a labeling system that patients can understand easily. There is now an ISO standard called 82304-2, which can do much of this for you if everybody accepts it. It has been implemented across the European, indeed across Europe, by a project called Label to Enable, and the hope is that as a result of this, its use will grow rapidly, and obviously this presentation is part of that. I am the head assessor of that Label to Enable project, so I'm obviously extremely supportive of it. It has created an evaluation system for evaluating medical health apps and indeed physical health apps Europe-wide with a single verdict, which is really very impressive. They've also developed a label that's modelled on the EU energy use label that gives a good summary for patients of what the app will do. And it's been praised by patients and clinicians alike. as an example of what I mean as to why a single verdict is vital, I'm going to take a slight detour here to talk about DTAC, which I'm sure many listeners will be aware of as the digital technology assessment criteria set up by the NHS in the teeth of opposition from DACA about 4 years ago. And the main complaint about it that we made at that time was that the assessment is local and not central. I was very involved with the setting up and the use of the digital assessment questions run by NHS Digital. What complicates matters more is that not only is the assessment local, but local assessors are also able to add extra criteria as well. And the end result is that different NHS units often do not concur. So what that does is it results in scarce SME innovation expertise rushing around the country to resolve these issues rather than actually innovating. So it's a real innovation killer, essentially. My final slide really is just to make the point that the infrastructure exists elsewhere. Germany has something called DIGA, France has something called PCAN. We are in the UK very much working on it. I'm in touch with various people in the NHS who are very actively working on this, but there's no obvious solution to it immediately. And meanwhile, apparently the NHS is going to spend at least 2 more years working out how they're going to replace DTAC, which is of great concern to us. We have DACA has a very strong campaign to overcome this. We're working with many of the other supplier organizations, particularly AXREM. So if you're interested, join us, read our newsletters and see what we're doing and support us, please. The key elements that Orca, who we're working with very closely on setting up this infrastructure, are you want to build trust, they want to raise awareness, they want to improve access to the infrastructure. You need to be able to reimburse developers for their work and also an overall governance structure. I'd be delighted to tell people more if they want more. So that's my very, very brief presentation. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Indeed, DACA has been a very strong voice in the industry. And again, I have been reading the newsletters quite regularly, and they are one gem of a story that you should read. It has a lot of insights and a lot of events that come up regularly. Thank you once again, Charles. There are no questions from the audiences yet, but if there is anything, I will send them over to you via email.
Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. See you soon. Last speaker of the day, we have gone a little over time, but I'm sure there is no problem with that. But we have Shahram Ahmadi, who will be talking about MD SAP compliance and its essentials. Shahram is my colleague at Meridia. Over to you, Shahram.
Okay. Thank you, Jay. Thank you for the short introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It's better to say hello, everyone. My name is Shahram Ahmadi. Let me share my screen to check with you, Jay. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me just, should be better.
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Shahram Ahmadi. As a short introduction, I'm a regulatory affairs and quality assurance specialist within 14 years of experience in the medical device industry. My work experience links all the stages of the medical device life cycle, including design, manufacturing, risk management, and also post-market surveillance. My educational background is material science, and as a certified auditor in quality management system for medical devices, and also person responsible for regulatory compliance. I currently work as an RAQA consultant with the Medidia company. I'm also pursuing my master's degree in medical technology regulatory affairs at Atlantic Technology University, Sligo, Galway. As a short introduction in the service of Medidia, my company, Medidia offers a broad range of services for the different type of clients in medical device industry, like establishment of the quality management system, compiling technical files based on according to MDR, and also helped companies to comply with ISO 13485 and QMSR, and help them to handle internal audits. Also help companies in transitional period to adapt from medical device directive to medical device regulation and getting the CE marking. And in the US market, we offer some other type of services like help companies for 510K notification and also pre-market approval for them. We also in the EU market assign a person responsible for regulatory compliance for the manufacturers outside of EU and also for the EU authorized companies. I'm talking about the MDSAP today, Medical Device Single Audit Plan. Let's start with the basic. What is MDSAP? The Medical Device Single Audit Plan is in fact a game changer for medical device companies and manufacturers. It's designed to streamline audits across the multiple regions, ensuring regulatory readiness for a highly efficient way. Significantly, MDSAP allows a single audit to satisfy regulatory requirements in different regulatory frameworks like EU and US and other key markets like Canada, Brazil, and Japan. MDSAP is based on ISO 13485 as a foundation, but with the specific extra requirements for each region. MDSAP is not a type of standard. It's in fact, it's better to say that this program helps companies save time, reduce duplications, and build trust with both stakeholders and regulators. But MDSAP requirements. What does MDSAP require for companies? At this core, as I said before, MDSAP builds upon ISO 13485, but it also includes extra requirements for each participating region. For example, for FDA, the FDA emphasizes more on QMSR, newly changed to KMSR, while Health Canada heavily emphasized on documentation and stringent reporting. It's good to know that to meet these requirements, companies need to align their quality management system accordingly. This means that updating documentation for the companies and training teams who's responsible to establish MDSAP and preparing thoroughly for audits. Finally, meeting these standards and implementing these procedures are about demonstrating a strong commitment to quality and safety across all regions involved in this plan. For example, US, EU, and Japan. Why MDSAP for market access? What's the benefit to comply with MDSAP for market access for the companies? Let's consider why MDSAP is such a vital tool for market access. In fact, it offers a streamlined path for companies to enter to different markets. As an example, MDSAP certification has been mandatory in Canada since 2019. In fact, by combining audits, MDSAP reduces approval timelines and highlights a proactive approach to companies. And MDSAP builds credibility with regulators and customers, both, which is crucial for success in today's competitive market for medical device manufacturers. Finally, MDSAP allows companies to demonstrate a global compliance while maintaining a unified quality management system. Here, quality management system, I mean a quality management system effective and in the best status. But what's the strategy consideration for market access? Well, let's talk about the strategy. A robust approach is crucial to leveraging MDSAP to enhance the market access. First, it's logic to identify for each medical device manufacturer the target markets and their specific requirements. I mean specific and extra requirements under MDSAP. And align the quality management systems crucially in the entire life cycle of each medical device. I should say that in significantly incorporating MDSAP as a part of the broader regulatory plan ensure for each medical device manufacturer to harmonize an efficient quality management system. By focusing on these aspects, manufacturer of medical device can minimize disruption and improve their audit outcomes. In fact, MDSAP should consider a strategic tool to strengthen the go-to-market plan for every manufacturers. And practical steps to achieve MDSAP certification. Let's talk more about the practical step. To achieve MDSAP certification, the first step is performing a gap analysis of the current status of the quality management system. Actually, adapting the documentation aligned with ISO 13485 and the extra regional requirements. Beyond that, it's essential to train the team responsible to implement the necessary process for MDSAP, and also conducting internal audit is crucial to identify any area for improvement. As one of the most important steps, selecting an experienced auditing organization is crucial, while this organization can guide you through the certification process smoothly. Finally, this proactive approach sets the medical device manufacturer for ongoing success in both audits and market readiness and market access. And the relation between MDSAP and QMSR compliance. Recently, the old QSR in FDA regulatory framework has been changed to QMSR. But let's look at how MDSAP aligns with QMSR compliance. In FDA new rules, I mean QMSR, MDSAP offers a solid foundation for companies preparing for FDA's QMSR requirements. It's good to know that it's true that FDA won't accept ISO or MDSAP certification as a substitute for their inspections, but MDSAP audit report will be considered during the routine FDA inspection as a very powerful amended report. So by aligning the quality management system with MDSAP, the companies can prepare for both ISO 13485 and QMSR audits and inspection, and also complete with these two regulatory framework. And this dual alignment ensure readiness for regulatory changes without duplicating effort. But future-proofing compliance with MDSAP. Let's think about the future. MDSAP equips companies to handle evolving regulatory landscape with confidence. For example, potential updates on ISO 13.5. Now we have the version 2016. Soon maybe the new version appears. And QMSR, it means that aligning with MDSAP can adapt and prepare companies for this type of change with changing in the new revision of the standards. Significantly, MDSAP creates a proactive framework to address these changes, building resilience into the quality management system of the companies. And MDSAP doesn't stop here. It aligns with 14971 as the main criteria in main standard for the risk management. And by aligning with MDSAP, the companies can be sure to the comprehensive strategy regarding the risk management. I can add that last but not least, adapting with MDSAP not only help companies in the future, but stay prepared for whatever happens ahead. Okay.
Thank you, Shara. Yeah, thank you, Sharam, for sharing your insights. I do not see any questions and answers or any chat messages. So I would like to thank all our speakers who joined us and collaborated at this for this webinar, and to all our attendees, you will be receiving the recording of this meeting and the link to the slides later on in a while. Once again, thanks to all our speakers and thank you for joining. See you soon.